crisis isn't Cat Matlala, it's the South African state. By now, it should be clear that the Cat Matlala story is not really about Cat Matlala. He is a symptom. The real problem is the system that allowed figures like him to rise, operate, and allegedly entrench themselves inside the state, while institutions meant to stop this either collapsed, froze, or looked the other way. So let's stop pretending this is an isolated case. It isn't. This is about how power actually works in South Africa today. South Africa is a constitutional democracy on paper, but in practice, power has slowly migrated away from voters, laws, and accountability and into informal networks, criminal networks, political networks, tender networks, protection networks. These networks do not replace the state, they inhabit it. Police officers don't just fail to investigate crime, some allegedly facilitate it. Public servants don't just mismanage funds, they allegedly reroute them. And institutions don't collapse suddenly, they are hollowed out patiently. That's how criminals don't overthrow the state. They rent it. Nowhere is this clearer than in policing. South Africans don't fear criminals because criminals are powerful. They fear criminals because the police are unreliable. Cases are not investigated properly. Dockets go missing. Witnesses are intimidated. Evidence expires. And when arrests do happen, they often feel symbolic, designed for headlines, not convictions. This creates a brutal reality. If you have money, connections, or leverage, the law becomes negotiable. That is not a failure of individual officers alone. It is a failure of leadership, systems, and political will. Which brings us to the National Prosecuting Authority. The NPA is supposed to be the firewall between corruption and consequence. Instead, it has become the bottleneck. South Africans have watched for years as high-profile cases stall, investigations continue indefinitely, commissions produce reports, not prosecutions. This is not about legal complexity alone. Other countries prosecute complex corruption cases all the time. The issue is capacity, urgency, and courage. Advocate Shamila Batohi did not inherit an easy institution. That much is fair. The NPA was damaged long before her tenure, but leadership is not judged by excuses, it is judged by outcomes. And the outcomes speak loudly. Few high-level convictions. Few completed prosecutions tied to state capture. Little visible urgency in cases involving political elites. The perception, fair or not, is that the NPA moves carefully when it should move decisively. And in a country this compromised, caution looks a lot like paralysis. This doesn't mean the NPA is malicious. It means it is ineffective in a moment that demands boldness. And that, too, is part of the problem. The result is a dangerous imbalance. Criminal networks operate with speed. The state responds with process. Criminals adapt quickly. Institutions deliberate endlessly. And in that gap, the rule of law bleeds out. This is why figures like Cat Matlala matter, not because they are unique, but because they are predictable outcomes of a weakened state. When accountability is delayed long enough, it becomes optional. But here's the most uncomfortable truth of all. This system survives not just because of criminals at the top, but because of silence, fatigue, and lowered expectations at the bottom. South Africans have slowly been conditioned to accept dysfunction as normal. Load shedding becomes routine. Corruption becomes background noise. Justice becomes something we hope for, not expect. That psychological surrender may be the most damaging failure of all. And yet, this is not where the story ends. Because despite everything, South Africa still has extraordinary strengths, a resilient civil society, independent courts that still hold the line, journalists who expose what power wants hidden, young people who are politically awake and impatient with excuses. Our Constitution remains one of the most progressive in the world. Our private sector still produces excellence. Our people still organize, adapt, and survive. This country has not failed. It has been betrayed, and betrayal can be confronted. The future of South Africa does not depend on moving one detainee to a supermax prison. It depends on rebuilding institutions that work without fear or favor, on prosecutors who prosecute, police who police, leaders who lead instead of manage decline. The potential is still here. But potential without accountability is just postponed disappointment, and South Africa has postponed accountability for far too long. End.